It seems, in the first place, that Theseus, of his own free will and without any compulsion, when he might have reigned peacefully in Trozen, where he was heir to the kingdom, no mean one, longed to accomplish heroic deeds, whereas Romulus was in exile and in the position of a slave. The fear of death was hanging over him if unsuccessful, and so, as Plato says, he was made brave by sheer terror, and through fear of suffering death and torture, was forced into doing great exploits. Moreover, Romulus's greatest achievement was the slaying of one man, the despot of Alba, whereas Scyron, Sinus, Procrustes, and Corynetes were merely the accompaniments and prelude to the greater actions of Theseus, and by slaying them he freed Greece from terrible scourges, before those whom he saved even knew who he was. He also might have sailed peacefully over the sea to Athens and had no trouble with those brigands, whereas Romulus could not be free from trouble while Amulius lived. And it is a great argument in favor of Theseus that he attacked those wicked men for the sake of others, having himself suffered no wrong at their hands, whereas the twins were unconcerned at Amulius's tyranny so long as it did not affect themselves. And although it may have been a great exploit to receive a wound in fighting the Sabines, and to slay Acron, and to kill many enemies in battle, yet we may compare with these, on Theseus's behalf, his battle with the Centaurs, and his campaign against the Amazons. As for the courage which Theseus showed in the matter of the Cretan tribute, when he voluntarily sailed to Crete with the youths and maidens, whether the penalty was to be given to the Minotaur to eat, or be sacrificed at the tomb of Androgeus, or even to be cast into dishonored slavery under an insolent enemy, which is the least miserable fate mentioned by any writer, what a strength of mind, what public spirit, and love of fame it shows. In this instance, it seems to me that philosophers have truly defined love as a service designed by the gods for the care and preservation of the young. For the love of Ariadne seems to have been specially intended by heaven to save Theseus, nor need we blame her for her passion, but rather wonder that all men and women did not share it. If she alone felt it, then I say she deserved the love of a god, because of her zeal for all that is best and noblest. Both were born statesmen, yet neither behaved himself as a king should do, but from similar motives, the one erred on the side of democracy, the other on that of despotism. The first duty of a king is to preserve his crown, and this can be effected as well by refraining from improperly extending his rights as by too great eagerness to keep them. For he who either gives up or over-restrains his prerogative ceases to be a king or constitutional ruler, but becomes either a despot or a demagogue. And in the one case is feared, in the other despised by his subjects. Still the one is the result of kindliness of disposition, and the other that of selfishness and ferocity. If we are not to attribute their misfortunes to chance, but to peculiarities of disposition, then we cannot acquit Romulus of blame in his treatment of his brother, nor Theseus in that of his son. But the greatest excuse must be made for the one who acted under the greatest provocation. One would not have thought that Romulus would have flown into such a passion during a grave deliberation on matters of state, while Theseus was misled in his treatment of his son by love and jealousy and a woman's slander, influences which few men are able to withstand. And what is more, Romulus's fury resulted in actual deeds of unfortunate result, whereas the anger of Theseus spent itself in words and an old man's curses, and the youth seems to have owed the rest of his suffering to chance. So here, at any rate, one would give one's vote for Theseus. Romulus, however, has the credit of having started with the most slender resources, and yet of having succeeded. The twins were called slaves and the sons of a swineherd before they achieved their liberty, yet they freed nearly all the Latin race, and at one and the same time gained those titles which are the most glorious among men, of slayers of their enemies, preservers of their own house, kings of their own nation, and founders of a new city, not by transferring the population of old ones, as Theseus did, when he brought together many towns into one, and destroyed many cities that bore the names of kings and heroes of old. Romulus did this afterwards, when he compelled his conquered enemies to cast down and obliterate their own dwellings, and become fellow citizens with their conquerors. Yet at first he did not change the site of his city nor increase it, but, starting with nothing to help him, he obtained for himself territory, patrimony, sovereignty, family, marriage, and relatives, and he killed no one, but conferred great benefits on those who, instead of homeless vagrants, wished to become a people and inhabitants of a city. He slew no brigands or robbers, but he conquered kingdoms, took cities, and triumphed over kings and princes. As for the misfortune of Remus, it seems doubtful whether Romulus slew him with his own hand, as most writers attribute the act to others. He certainly rescued his mother from death, and gloriously replaced his grandfather, whom he found in an ignoble and servile position, on the throne of Aeneas. He did him many kindnesses, and never harmed him even against his will. But I can scarcely imagine that Theseus's forgetfulness and carelessness in hoisting the black sail can, by any excuses, or before the mildest judges, come much short of parricide. Indeed, an Athenian, seeing how hard it is even for his admirers to exculpate him, has made up a story that Aegeus, when the ship was approaching, hurriedly ran up to the Acropolis to view it, and fell down, as though he were unattended, or would hurry along the road to the shore without servants. The crimes of Theseus in carrying off women are without any decent excuse. First, because he did it so often, for he carried off Ariadne and Antiope and Anaxo of Trozen, and above all, when he was an old man, he carried off Helen, when she was not yet grown up, and a mere child, though he was past the age of even legitimate marriage. Besides, there was no reason for it, for these Trozenian, Laconian, and Amazonian maidens, besides their not being betrothed to him, were no worthier mothers for his children than the Athenian daughters of Erechtheus and Cecrops would have been, so we must suspect that these acts were done out of mere riotous wantonness. Now Romulus, though he carried off nearly 800 women, yet kept only one Hersilia for himself, and distributed the others among the unmarried citizens, and afterwards, by the respect, love, and justice with which he treated them, proved that his wrongful violence was the most admirable and politic contrivance for effecting the union of the two nations. By means of it, he welded them into one, and made it the starting point of harmony at home and strength abroad. The dignity, love, and permanence with which he invested the institution of marriage is proved by the fact that during 230 years, no man separated from his wife, or woman from her husband. But just as in Greece, very exact persons can mention the first instance of parricide or matricide, so all the Romans know that Spurius Carvilius was the first to put away his wife, upon a charge of barrenness. Events also testify to the superior wisdom of Romulus, for in consequence of that intermarriage, the two kings and the two races shared the empire, whereas from the marriage of Theseus, the Athenians obtained no alliance or intercourse with any nation, but only hatreds and wars, and deaths of citizens, and at last the destruction of Aphidnae, and they themselves escaped from the fate which Paris brought upon Troy only by the mercy of their enemies and their own entreaties and supplications. The mother of Theseus, not nearly but quite, suffered the fate of Hecuba, who was abandoned and given up by her son, unless the story of her captivity is false, as I hope it is, together with much of the rest. Also, the religious part of their histories makes a great distinction between them. For Romulus's success was due to the great favor of heaven, whereas the oracle given to Aegeus, to refrain from all women in foreign parts, seems to argue that the birth of Theseus took place contrary to the will of the gods.